I'm Nirmala, and I'm from the county office in San Mateo County. And Sarah Kinahan is with me, and she works with me here on many projects. Um, and she's going to be manning the switching back and forth between documents for us. Some of you I know have been with the association a long time, and this is really old news for you, but I'm grateful for your support on this effort. For those of you that are new, this is going to be kind of an introduction to the process, and if some of you need more help than this is providing, we can kind of look at that next. So the priority setting process is one of the local planning council mandates. It's something that we're expected to do each year, or to officially let the state know that we're going to let our priorities ride for another year. And at some point in the past, CDE asked for our help to develop a process so that we were more or less approaching it in the same way. So first, this is what we're going to do today. I'm doing the introduction. I kind of jumped it here. And then we're going to review what the documents we use with the state very briefly. And then we're going to review an Excel template and setting up community columns and finding the data on supply and on demand, and then that step of determining the priorities. And then we're going to go over the process for reviewing and finalizing priorities with a suggested sort of process timeline, and then a conclusion talking about where the resources will be and next steps for you or for the association with this material. So in an introduction to the priority setting process, back in the way old days, everyone did it kind of in a different way. And for example, some counties might say, well, all of my zip codes are a priority 1, and that was accepted. And at some point, CDE was kind of saying, can you help us refine this a little bit, because we actually do want to use it to find out which of the zip codes of greatest need, even though we understand that you like more care, more subsidized care everywhere, or wherever you could find a good place. So we, as an association, went to work on it, and we had a task force of small, medium, and large counties, and counties with very few resources to work on this, and those with more resources. And we tested a process and used it together for a number of years. And then recently, last year, we asked CDE to let us amend that process, and that's what I'm talking about today. So I'm going to be assuming you've never done it before. The only thing that is new about this and the previous common way that we did it is that now we're reporting on all 3 age groups: infant, toddler, preschool, and school age. So before they wanted only 2 priorities from us. Now we're going to be submitting 3. And then the other thing that's different is that we have access to the AIR data browser, so that puts some of the elements that we need in one place. So we didn't have that in the old days either. So here's where you can find information from CDE about the process. We made these links live. By design, there's very little information there about the instructions. The instructions you may have seen are kind of minimal, but this allows for some level of local flexibility still, and different ways of presenting things at a local level that make more sense in your county. Sarah, do you want to, we don't need to click on it, but maybe we could open the priority setting document, which is in the folder behind if you want. I forgot about that. So not the submittal, but that one. Yeah. So this is more or less what you would find on the CDE website, giving a little bit of history for us having this mandate and who the LPCs are. And then it says that we will develop the priorities using these basic data sources: American Community Survey, getting local data such as needing Head Start data, and using other pertinent local data to inform these bigger pieces, and then using the data to determine whether it's a priority 1, 2, or 3. We also indicate under bullet number 3 that we are going to identify the low-performing schools in our areas and include that. That is kind of optional in terms of it's not part of the calculation, but we began to want to add that because frequently we're asked about it. How does that map on to the priorities? So we can talk about that in a minute. And so then it describes the process of what would happen once the priorities are assigned, is that we will need to review them with our local planning council, and then if they pass the draft priorities, then they will be made available for public review and approved by the County Board of Supervisors at a public hearing, or you may have the public hearing before the Board of Supervisors. Anyway, at some point along the line there needs to be a public hearing and approved by the board if you're going to change them. If you decide not to change, then you don't need to take that decision to the Board of Supervisors. Your LPC can decide that you don't think there's been enough change. You're just going to stick with where you are, and you just inform the state. So then the second part of this, if we scroll down on this, you'll see that there is a page on the priorities for CSPP, which stands for the California State Preschool Program, full and part day priorities together, and it gives you a range for counties of different sizes for what a priority 1, 2, 3 would be for your county. So if I look at number 3, counties with over 200,000 residents, you can see which counties at that point in time those are, and that's my size in San Mateo. So priority 1 is a zip code where there are 40% or more eligible children not served or underserved, and that there are more than 150 children not served or underserved. Priority 2 moves to 25% unserved and 75% of actual child count unserved. So for each county size, there is this this breakdown. So it's both a combination of the number of kids that seem to be the gap between your spaces and your demand, and the percentage.
You'd heard or
So, okay. Perhaps I'm just going to check and see if anybody has any immediate questions. Why don't we wait on these questions, because I think they might be answered as we go farther ahead. So the very first thing then that we've looked at is we created as an association a sample Excel spreadsheet template that I'll kind of walk you through. This is not required, it's optional, and you never are going to want to submit this to CDE. They strictly want to know which are the zip codes. They don't want to know how you developed it and on and on. They just want to know the results of your process. You could come up with a modified template of your own, or do it in a different way. But just to make it easy, yeah, let's go ahead and open it. There's when we open the sheet, you'll see there's a down at the bottom that there are tabs for. Let's click on the state preschool detail, Sarah. So this is sort of one of the more complicated ways to look at it. If you really want to count different types of preschool part and full day subsidized care and make all that very transparent to your council, this would be what you would use, and this might be a good way for you to collect the information. And then there's a shorter one that sort of groups some like categories together. But again, using this is optional, but it does have already some formulas in it so that it can make it a little bit easier for you. If we tab over to the far left, Sarah, you'll see state preschool again. This is a more simple version with, say, all of the part day rolled up, all of the full day rolled up, all of stage 2 children and CAP rolled up, and so it's simpler to look at depending on your council and their interests. My council wants to know everything about each of the age groups, I think, to make sure that I haven't left someone out or just am not thinking about it. They want to understand it really well, and I think it's a good process myself because it reminds everyone of all the different types of contracts that we have in our county. So also on the tab at the bottom, you'll see there's a tab for CCTR infant toddler. This is the short version of that. But it also has a longer version with detail. And then if we scroll all the way to the left, there's one there's a tab for school-aged here. So there ends up being a spreadsheet for each of the age groups, basically. There you go. So let me start at the top of. Let's take a look at the state preschool one, just for the hell of it. The minimal that you would need to put under the community would be your zip codes, and the zip codes that appear in your county. You would want to eventually sort of clean those up so that your non-residential zip codes that are, for example, just for PO boxes, or in our case, our airport has its own zip, but there are no children living there. So, that's not one that I'm likely to use as part of our ones. Or you may have zip codes where there's very, very small population, but they're close together. So an example of that for me is that we have our mid-coast. Now I have them all divvied out, but sometimes I may clump them together. So it gives a sense of those small zip codes. You're not required to put the city by it, and it may be challenging for you in some cases if you have a zip code that has multiple towns, or you have a zip code that is shared by 2 or more towns, or even by another county. Those all make it more challenging for you. The state is not interested in how you parse that out, but your community might be. So one thing I advise is as part of your council, find out who are your most, who do you need data from, who participate in your planning council, and ask them to participate on a task force to work on this together, if you haven't, especially if you haven't done it before, so that you can work together to determine, as I needed to do for East Palo Alto zip code, what percentage of the kids in that zip code really live in San Mateo. So we may not have it perfect, but we come to a conclusion, and that's what we use, and that's what we will tell our community about it. So it's great to put the city in, because then those who care about your findings will be able to understand and have a commitment to the data and take interest in it. Again, the state doesn't want to know what city those zips are. They just want to know the zip codes. We also add the Board of Supervisors districts. That's optional, but you might be asked, especially if you're presenting this to the board, which of the districts has the biggest gaps, has the most priority zip codes in it, or any of those other questions that you would be able to answer real quickly if you had plugged it in ahead of time. So that's the community pieces, and then we're going to leave it for a second and just take a look at the demand slide, or the supply side rather. Sorry to say. So the supply data, how do you know how many spaces for these age groups do you have? There's a couple of ways to look for it. One is to conduct a local slot survey. This takes some time, and you wouldn't want to do it if you were under the gun trying to get your priorities out the door in short order. And it's totally optional. It has some value, but it's definitely not required. We can give you an example of one type of slot survey. So yeah, I can show it to you quick. We in San Mateo email this Excel spreadsheet to each of the agencies. We could probably set this up on a SurveyMonkey eventually too, but I send it to them. One for each one for each contractor, and then they plug in their sites and those site zip codes. And then I ask them this series of questions for ABC CDC site. How many licensed, what's your license capacity for preschool, for infants and toddlers, for school age. So that's just off their license, but it's another place to put it. And then I drill down to how many CSPP sites do you have? And all this that Sarah has highlighted are all related to 3- and 4-year-olds. So the California State Preschool full day spaces do you have at that site? How many part day? How many part day AM and PM? We go that far in our county because sometimes we want to know physically how many classrooms are there, and then also just to know if they're already doing double service. So we ask AM, PM. And then we might ask if there are any subcontracted state preschool spaces. Your county may not have that happening, and so it may not be pertain to you, but that's with one agency is subcontracting some of their spaces to another site, and you want to know where are those subcontracted sites. Then you can identify them that way. And then it asks about Head Start Part Day, so that's Head Start funding only. And we in our county, we ask how many spaces do you have that are Head Start wrapped with CSPP to create full day spaces, and how many Head Start full day spaces do you have that full Head Start funding only if you have it. And then knowing this is just a snapshot in time, but are you serving full cost children, or do you frequently have children you're serving under vouchers at that site? And I take that with a grain of salt because those often come and go, but what's the story with that? So that provides you with with everything you need to know about that agency's preschool sites, pretty much where they're caring for who. And then it moves on to the CCTR infant toddler spaces and the early Head Start spaces and the any early Head Start CCTR wraps. This is a level of detail that my county wants to know, so they want to make sure I'm not double counting the early Head Start and the CCR and counting them twice. And if they're wrapped, that's and that's important to them that I'm counting it accurately. So that's why we go through this. If your county things are not as complicated as they are for me, then you don't need to be, you don't have to go to this level of detail. But for me, it gives a picture, and I've found it to be very useful when we're doing advocacy or people are asking me all kinds of questions. I have that information. So that's optional. There it is. That source is the primary way that you can find out where children are being cared for by ZIP. Most of our other sources don't provide that information. They tell us where the child resides, which is also valuable to know, but sometimes you want both. So another big source of information is the 801A data that the Department of Ed collects from all the contractors on a monthly basis, and they publish that data once a year. Usually it's October data because they feel like programs are mostly enrolled by then. And the AIR data browser, which works with CCCA to make it easier for us to find stuff, they load the 801A data there as well as other things. So you can, at this point, go to the AIR data browser and look for those pieces. We'll go into that in a minute. But there are some things that CDE doesn't capture, and one of those is your Head Start and early Head Start data. So as you noticed, if I was doing a slot survey, I would have that information. Or if I'm not doing a slot survey, you would need to ask your local Head Start agency to provide you with that information. And then if you want to include CalWORK Stage 1, you would need to get that from your local Human Services agency because CDE does not manage that program. And then if you want to include ACES funding in your, probably the best place is to ask your County Office of Education for that. But those last two are optional, your own county decision. So we've already talked about the local slot survey. So the AIR data browser, I think in a minute we're going to just go there. But basically when you do, and your county will need to have paid your dues so that you are part of our subscription for the data browser. The association pays for part of the subscription, and then the individual counties, according to their size, pay a small amount annually that helps us have this subscription. So when we go there, we're going to choose the age group, the year that we want to work with. We want to see it by zip, our county, and we're going to choose what we want to look for. And in this case, it's going to be enrollment. So maybe we should just go ahead and go there now. Well, wait a minute. Sorry, Sarah.
Okay.
Before we delve into the data browser, I just wanted to say something quick about the other data sources. What you want to ask Head Start for is ask for their enrollment by age and zip of residence. Or by where they're being cared for. But if you're using zip of residence for everything else, probably that's the way you want to see it. And then the same thing of your local human services agency, and then county office of ed. This one, they do not take attendance and keep enrollment data for ACEs quite in the same way. It's the you can ask them about their average daily enrollment at different school sites, or if they can't give you that, the level of funding per school site, and then you can divide that by the 170 days of the year and the amount of ACES funding per day, and you can get a rough estimate of how many kids are served using that funding. It's all kind of rough because it's not ACES is a part day, part year program, and it isn't. It's awarded to districts that have high numbers of low-income children, but they don't actually income screen. So often they're using whether a child needs support with their education. So I think in our county we go ahead and include it, even though we wouldn't consider that it's meeting all the child care needs of a working family, but it is providing something, and it's good to know which zip codes have ACES funding. So let's pause for some questions before we move to the data browser.
I'll start bringing it up.
Okay. So you can unmute yourself to ask a question if you want, or type it in. Looks okay. So, all right. Well, we'll keep on rolling then, and hope that we're doing okay. So for this first one on supply, let's look at preschool. For preschool reports, this is where you would put in your the password and so forth. You're going to select a year, and here you have choices. You can, if at this point the 2014 data is up. Oh, Michelle asked why we would ask for Head Start data by child residence. I think that's a choice. That's a choice for you. If you're using a slot survey and you're using that to characterize your supply, then the Head Start data matching, where is the child receiving care is the best way to do it. If you are not, if you were using 801A data, that data is all on the residence of the child. So apples to pears, probably you would want to do the same thing with your Head Start data. So whichever one you're predominantly using, I guess, I would ask for. Yes, so 2014 is the most recent American Community Survey data that, and 801A data that the data browser is using. Actually, it's only when we come to the band that we need to consider that probably. So you would want to use 2014 for this if you're using this to find out how many kids are being served on these different program types. So you're going to show your data by zip code. You're going to select county and choose your county. And I would recommend choosing all 3, 4, and 5s, even though for CSPP you may only end up using your 3 and 4-year-old data, but I would go ahead and ask for it. And in this case, you're going to be zeroing in on enrollment. So the variable that you're going to choose next is enrollment. Good. You're always going to select from here the individual programs. You're not really going to get into the program settings because that's wrapping all kinds of different settings in one, and it's not really helpful for the purposes of this. You're going to want to click number of children enrolled in California State Preschool, number of children in CalWORK Stage 2 and Stage 3, and migrant. If you have migrant, maybe you don't know, so you might as well click it, and Chan and CAP. So you're going to want all of those, and then you're going to click on Generate Report. And it might take a minute, but then you're going to get a cool looking report that is from the 801A data from the state. The nice thing about it is that you don't have to figure out, and deal with the fact that all of the counties are reported there. You can just look at your own information. So it presents it here, and at the far left you have your zip codes. These zip codes, though, may include some of the non-residential zip codes or such low population that, there is no population there. So you're probably going to want to, well, first you're going to want to export this to Excel. They give you that choice. You click on it, and then an Excel file will download to your desktop, and then you can begin to mess with that by deleting zip codes that don't make sense. And then these, what I typically do is I will do another save as so that I still have retained this data someplace as it was originally, and then I'll start playing with it. Do I want to know the 3s and 4s together? Then I'll add myself a row and add it together. And the 5-year-olds, you may want to think about them. There are very few 5-year-olds enrolled. Shall I just, add them all together as the children served at this point? And that's what I would do in this case. Just take that number of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds served, and then you can add those zip codes into your overall template for how much CSPP is happening. The one thing about the 801A data, or this data, it doesn't tell you about part-time and full-time, or part-day and full-day care. Neither does the state ask us that, so that's not a problem. But if your community is asking, you're only, again, really at this point going to get that from doing a slot survey to understand it. CDE does collect it, but they have yet to give it to us at a zip code level. Maybe they will, but at this point they don't. So that's how you find out about CSPP enrollment. Obviously, you don't know about Head Start from this. You only know about CSPP, but you also will see, okay, how much do I have in CalWORK stage 2? How much do I have in stage 3? And if we don't have migrants, but if you do, you're able to plug all of those into your spreadsheet to show what you have. Okay, so you would, if we go back to the data browser and you were going to want to look at infants and toddlers, it's the same basic process, just what you're collecting will look a little different. Again, picking a county. I would choose all the age groups. And again, you're going to do enrollment. Now, this is a little odd in that it says number of children enrolled in the California State Preschool Program. That should be 0. I would not check that. So I would check the number of children in CalWORK Stage 2 and 3. And alternative payment. And what's it?
We have a question about where you would include the Stage 2 and Stage 3 children.
Well, I put they are a category in the template. If we take a look back at the template, so they're part of your supply. You could
it looks like we rolled them up along with the AP vouchers.
Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3, and then CAP is over to the rolled up stage 2 and 3 together, and then CAP, and then the whole thing on the template. The whole thing will add all of those together to end up with your total subsidized full and part day if you've reported it that way, if you've used a slot survey and reported it that way, or it will just roll up to your total full and part day together. There is how do we get the info on it's there in the data browser. It was yesterday when I looked at it. You are right. It's now not appearing. My goodness. So we'll follow up on that. Let's click the number of children enrolled in California State Preschool and see if that's the default and they just didn't name it correctly. The income eligibility is the same for those two programs. I think that's an error in this update, but let's see. Oh dear. Okay, so at least for our county, there's a problem here that we don't have the CCTR, because that's the whole point of doing this, is to find out what the CCTR is. I apologize. I will follow up with this. I worked with it yesterday, and I swear I saw the CCTR there yesterday. So sorry that I'm being confusing, but on those age groups, you normally you wouldn't want CSPP at all, because no way are they eligible. Only the kids, they're eligible for the CalWORKs program. They're eligible for full day center-based subsidized care, which is CCTR, and these in possibly the other CHAN and migrant, though I'm not positive about migrant. So big problem there. If this continues and you need to do it right away, you can go directly to CDE to the 801A data there. It just takes a little longer to separate it out, but we put the link in the PowerPoint to go directly to the site where the 801A data is there. What it is one giant Excel spreadsheet for all of the counties. So you need to kind of find your zip codes and then scroll to find CCTR, and you could paste it in. It's a little bit more of a pain in the neck, but not that bad. I apologize for this. And then school aged is the same basic idea. We hope. Only better, we hope. Let's see. This is not going to break it down by all age groups. Up, 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 up. Wrong, wrong. Okay, so these children would not be enrolled in state preschool. They would be enrolled in CCTR used for school-age children. So that's the thing that's not present here at the moment, and that we will find out why and get it corrected. They're standing at the ready to help us fix it. So let's move on and see if you have other demand questions.
Supply questions?
Or supply questions, rather. Okay. So demand data is, there are a couple of questions that you need to think about. Is where do you want to include 5-year-old children who are eligible for state subsidy? With TK coming in, do you want to just say that if you have an average age cohort of 2 years long, that pretty much captures the number of children that would be in state preschool, for example? We used to, in the past, I used to include, say, a quarter of the 5-year-olds in this, because a quarter of them roughly would have the chance of being either in kindergarten or in I would include a quarter of 4-year-olds could be in kindergarten. Is really I'm saying it incorrectly. Right now, it would seem that we have all 4-year-olds and all 3-year-olds eligible could attend CSPP. So I would say probably you're going to want to use for the demand the 3- and 4-year-old age cohort, but that is your choice if you feel strongly that something different is happening in your county or you want to think about it differently. The 5-year-olds, you'll notice, though, are not captured in the school age data. So you want to think, what is the cohort, the age cohort amount of 5-year-olds, because they will need after-school care at a minimum, right? So the 5-year-olds appear in the preschool section. And now you have some examples or a question about which data in the data browser you want to use. 2014 right now is a single year 2014 data from the American Community Survey of children eligible at 30% of state median income. For smaller counties, because the survey is a survey, they may find that what are called the 3-year averages are more stable. So if one year the the respondents didn't happen to have young children very much, and the next year they did, putting them all together, the 3-year averages might be more stable. AIR has said they'll have that the 3-year averages haven't been released quite yet. That they are American Community Survey will do them soon, like in within a month or so, and that they will post those so that you would have 3-year averages for 2014 very soon. So the data browser is pretty much the only place that you can find out the 70% of SMI, as opposed to low income generally, or 200% of poverty, or some other figure. We use 70% because that's the cutoff of eligibility for the state subsidy programs, plural. So we're going to go to the data browser to take a look at this, but I just want to point out for infant toddler priority that families at 70% of SMI are eligible for the program, but they also need to be working or in school in order to get a CCTR space, because they are only full day spaces for working families, unlike part day state preschool. So let's go to yield. Let's go to this. Let's just go to the next page. Yeah. So you're going to do what we did before. If you went to the infant toddler report, you'd select the different age groups. In this case, and you choose zip code and all of that. But when it comes down to the variables, you want to choose population demand. And in eligibility here, this can be some of the verbiage here was popped in here for different audiences. These virtually are all the same. So the number of children in low-income working families, they mean at 70% of state median. The number of children eligible for state preschool is also under 70%, and income eligible for CCTR is also 70%. So you're just wanting to know basically what is the number of low-income families who are working. I like to look at what is the number of children in working families. So this is not going to be low-income only, but all families. And the very bottom one, the number of children under 70% of state median income. So that would be whether they're working or not, in other words. So that's the total that would be income eligible. And then you're going to generate a report in the same way that we did before. So for infants and toddlers, you're going to want to zero in really on the low-income families in working families, because they're the only ones that qualify for state subsidy. So you could then plug those, that you'll get a zip code report of those. You would populate the infant toddler spreadsheet with that as the demand. Let's switch gears and take a look at the preschool one. In this case, we're going to report the demand to the state for both full and part day, because we're adding the supply together also, both full and part day together. So in this case, 3- and 4-year-olds are eligible for some type of CSPP at 70% of SMI. For your own local thinking, you might want to, if you're doing a slot survey so that you know how many part day and full day preschool spaces you have, You may want to discuss this at a local community level and report how many children are in working families that have 3 and 4-year-olds, and uh, subtract that from the total families to find out who isn't, who has a parent at home. But in reality, we discussed this ad nauseum at our both the executive committee and in data committee calls. And the reason that we don't report the need for part day and the need for full day and didn't request that from CDE, didn't request to report those as priorities, is that we didn't want to disadvantage our counties if the governor, for example, said, well, it has happened many, many times, I'm only increasing part day state preschool. Would we want to disadvantage our county and say, no, actually, we only need full day, we don't need any part day, therefore, our priority is 0 for that or something. We felt like that was too harsh, and also that the reality was, if there are not full day spaces, that there are working families using part day. So we would rather not disadvantage our counties by reporting the two separately. However, it's a very important issue and something very important to know at a local level, so that you could, for example, really encourage programs to wrap with Head Start and create more full day, or that we could advocate for more full day, and we have the numbers, to give in that case. So I don't know if this makes sense, or you have questions about that. Just know that we've spent a long time debating it. Okay, so if we go to the next thing for state preschool demand, you would generate the report based on the income basically only, but I collect these other things, I include them in the spreadsheet so that I know, so that I can report to the council. The number of children in low-income working families, the number in working families overall of all incomes, and the number of children under 70% of state median income. These other targeted groups are just other information which can be useful. They're gathered by AIR from CDE and other sources, but they're not part of the priority setting process, so I'm leaving them out. It's not that they're not interesting, they're just not needed for this. So then you generate a report, and you clean up the zip codes as before, and you would use this information to post into your CSPP sheet, probably minus your 5-year-olds. And you will make note of how many 5-year-olds you have that are income eligible in working families, because you'll want to add that to your school age data. I hope I didn't lose you there, but that's it. So then you'd move on to school age, and you would do virtually the same thing. In this case, like in the infants, you would be choosing to use number of children in low-income working families as the data that you'd be plugging in, because they have to be working to be accessing CCTR spaces for school-age children. Okay. Any questions about the data browser, even though it has this big error in it? I'm going to ask them to do it immediately, so it should be there quick. Okay, moving right along. If we go back to the the Excel, we will go to the Excel spreadsheet in a minute for the priorities. The priority template does do the math for you if you have put in your data for supply and the data for children eligible. Oh, here's a question here. So wouldn't children eligible for Title V give you children whose families are going to school? Yes, it should, unless they're not in school for some reason, but it's really it's the eligibility is just what about the income eligible. It doesn't include 5-year-olds though, Missy, so you would need to add the 5, it's 6 to 12. So I hope that was clear. How do we go from getting this data to determining the percentages? Okay, so let's take a look at the data template again. Let's look at the simpler version of it, just because it's a little easier to see it in one place. So with this simpler version, I don't have I have for example, the CSPP and the Head Start together. Those are the changes to kind of say here's all our center-based subsidy supply, and here's all our voucher supply, and here's our total full and part day. If you plug those in, it will do the calculations for you, and it will yield in the yellow the number of children not served, and it will show you the percentage of children not served. And then in the priority 1 and 2 and 3, you'd look at your table and see what is the threshold for you for your agency. Is it how does it function? Is it 50%? Is it 75%? Is it 100 children? What is it?
So in the example I just did, based on our county size, we have in this test zip code, we have a high percentage of children not served, 62%, but the actual number is low. So for us, this would probably be a priority 3.
Yes, for our county size, it would be a priority 3, even though there's a high percentage not served. So I'd plug that in. Often, too, something that I do to help my council think about it is I put in a row for what was the previous priority, because I'll inevitably be asked who went up, who went down, what was the change. So that's a little detail, but I do. So the templates are all there along the bottom of the tabs. There's a simplified set that are the first ones, and then the more complicated ones are the next set of tabs along the bottom. And there's one for each age group. What's nice for me then, I end up with, however I want to look at it, I wind up with one document that has a tab for each of my age groups that it's easy to send out and email, but I can print them separately and have them look cool. And we are absolutely sharing the actual Excel file with you, plus the PowerPoint and other documents that might be helpful. So then, dashing through this, because I know we're a little over time and some of you may need to go, the school performance data that we talk about, it's really not ready for prime time yet. For a while, the state was thinking about doing allocations of funding based on which were the low performing school zip codes. And now they don't use API, they're using Smarter Balanced, and they are still kind of testing that out, and they have them. I would be reluctant to report that as low performing schools at this point and wait for future years. But it is something your council might want to know, where are children disadvantaged because schools are struggling as well as children are struggling. And with the school age, as we said, you have the choice about including ACEs or not including ACEs. If you don't include the after-school education and safety funding and where it's located, then your need for school age care will be even more gigantic, I guess, than it perhaps is in every community. So that's why I try to do it, but it's not required. CDE doesn't require us to do that. So once you've done this math and developed these spreadsheets, then you want to share it with someone. And my advice would be first to share it with your advisory group, because you might find, gosh, you know, some of this is a little odd. There might be something that looks strange, or you may have local knowledge about something that the census, the American Community Survey, hasn't picked up yet. For example, that a new housing development, several have gone into a zip, and you know that the population is rising there. So for some reason, you believe that it should be a lesser or a higher priority than what the data absolutely says. In this case, you want to debate those and call those out very clearly to your council and have them vote on those exceptions that you want to make and why. It can't be just because, you know, the contractor in that area is mad at you because they went from 1 to 2. That wouldn't fly as far as a local knowledge. That would be just, you know, political pressure, right? But sometimes there are things that you know, or in the case, one of the ones that I have used in our county is that there's a county that has some open space in it adjacent to a zip code of very high, but the priority for the one with space is a little bit lower than the one that's adjacent. But I know there's a pocket of poverty right on the border. So we will as a community say there's an opportunity to serve these children in this neighboring zip code. We would like it. We're not going to give it a priority 1, but we're going to give it a further level of priority. So again, CDE doesn't want to know about these local things because they want to just see the macro process. But it's a matter of being transparent with your own community. If they believe that this is, you know, the data or things you've shown are reliable and vote for that, then you may include that. Another source of information to help you get data might be, I know in the Bay Area we have something called ABAG, which is the Bay Area counties do data crunching, and they do a growth factor for different zip codes, how much they're expected to be growing over the next while or since American Community Survey data is available. So you might want to apply that growth factor to see where the child population would be then. Things like that. But in general, you don't have to use local knowledge, but if there are, this is where you use it. And what I do is I make those notes right at the bottom of the template. So, you know, a star by that zip code or that priority, this is why it's this, even though, you know, it doesn't quite meet priority 2 or whatever it is. Okay, moving right along.
I have a question about
Sure.
how to get access to the AIR data browser login.
If you are Tammy Burns, our treasurer, gives that to every county that's paid their dues. She emails you and said, "Here's the data browser one." If you're not sure if you paid that, she can let you know. And she's real responsive, so she would give it to you today, I'm sure, if she got your email. And if not, you know, the what you pay is not very great. One of the things about it is at this point, because we are subscribers, I don't give that password out to just anybody. I ask, would you like me to do you a report? You know, and I'll generate it, or I will give it to the data committee that is working on a special project with me, perhaps. But otherwise, our association and counties individually are paying so that the world can have access, and we can't afford it. And the website, Judy's asking the website. Oh, the AIR, yeah. So that's in the PowerPoint, Judy. So I'll post that, but it's basically it's EL needs assessment.org. Okay. Then last of all, I guess, is the getting ready to prepare for a public hearing and to present it to your council and to the Board of Supervisors. Just to be helpful, it may not be, I am going to include in the packet of templates and materials the sort of announcement that I do, or the memo that I give to the Board of Supervisors about, here I am again, this is what this is, and because it may have been a while since they've heard about it, or they may have not heard about it ever before. So it's just a sample announcement, kind of explaining why we do it and what it is, and then an actual board resolution language that sometimes it's helpful to the county clerk or whatever to give them a little information to use. So other counties will probably also contribute some of that, so that you can have different templates. That's totally individual. But I stumbled over that and was glad to have somebody else's to use. So as far as the timeline and thinking about it, it does take. I wanted to add this from Kat Troyer. This was another way that she provided a picture of the subsidized supply and demand, just in the aggregate for the age groups overall for her council. And she also has some other templates that she used to dump the data, and I think she has, I believe, knock on wood, she's offered to give folks a little bit more assistance with walking through the Excel processes that she uses, but we'll find out whether that's something people need and want and whether she's willing. So if not, I know that data committee members, and she is one, will be available to help with questions that you have after trying to mess with it, or if you get stuck. So here's a suggested, everything was right with the world. When it would be, more manageable to do it would be to, if you're going to do a slot survey, do it in fall, kind of asking them to take a look at October or November, and then begin gathering the supply and demand data from the web, the AIR data browser, and other sources. It's good to ask Head Start and HSA for their data early, because sometimes it takes a while. And then you can review the data with your advisory group and get on the agenda for the Board of Supervisors, which can take time. Then in spring, you can hold a public hearing. That could be part of your LPC meeting, where you say, now it's a public hearing, and people who want to speak to this, may speak to it, and it's published so that the community would know that it's taken place. In our case, we do that public hearing as part of the Board of Supervisors meeting. They begin it and then take any comment and then end it. And then it's ready to submit to CDE. It's due by May 31st. Or you submit to them that you're going to wait and let the existing priorities stand and move to the next year. If right now you are saying, well, gosh, I only have priorities submitted for CSPP and CCTR together, I would just tell them that your school-aged, the infant, toddler, and the school-aged priorities for you are the same at this point. That would be a fast-track way to ask them to record that you don't have time to do the full process this year. Just ask them to use CCTR twice. In other words, the priorities that you are in place already in your county for full-day child care, infants, toddlers, and school age, just divide, use the same priorities. That's will be my recommendation. And then there are, I think on our first slide, we showed you links to what you actually, how they want you to submit it. Basically, they want an Excel file that has your county code and just the zip codes, and beside them the priority number. It's that simple. There is another form that sort of asks you to deliver it in a Word format. Priority 1, which are your zip codes, and then you list them all, and so forth. So those two are on at the links that I've given you on the website. And last of all, I think we're going to be posting the webinar recording and all the templates and the PowerPoint on the CCCA website and the SMCOE site. We also have we also have a Dropbox folder that more immediately has these templates and documents in it, not the recording, but all the other things. The PowerPoint will be in there, and if you request, I can just send you a link to the. I can look and see who's on the call today, and send you a link to that that Dropbox folder. It won't allow you to change them, but you can download them and then work with them on your own desktop.
We had one person ask, what is the next webinar about? Is it the same information, or?
The next webinar is about the needs assessment process and the sort of nothing but the facts needs assessment. What are the data elements that are bottom line required? You could always do more, but what are they and where do you find them? And the templates that some of us have used for that. and we're going to record that one too. Okay. So I'm hearing, would love a link, yay. So I think I'll still be able to see everybody's email and give it to them. I just don't know whether I guess I could have Joyce send out the link as well in an email to just everybody, whether they were on this or not. That's probably the best, most efficient way to do it. Good. Any other questions for the good of the order? Okay. Unmute if you wish or anything, and then we'll just looking to see if anyone's typing, and then we'll sign off.
Nirmala, this is Michelle. Hello?
Yeah, hi.
Oh, okay, good. I do actually have a question, and it's going back to my original question about where the children live versus where they're receiving services. So the 801A data captures what? Where the children live?
Right now, residents.
It's by residents.
They on the website they show one view of things by where a child is cared for, but it doesn't break it down by fund source. It's all kind of lumped together, so it's kind of not useful except in a big broad look. We've asked them for this, and I'm going to ask them for it again. I think we may have better success this time, but at least they put something up about where the child resides. That was the first time that we actually got any of it up. I think they don't really understand what we need and why. And then, of course, I think for the voucher programs that they don't actually capture where the child is being cared for, though I'm not positive about that.
I guess that's, because, I'm not sure if I'm comparing pears and apples and apples.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I was assuming that the AIR data was capturing the 801A data, and for some reason I had it in my head that it was based on where the children were being served.
Right. Well, they didn't give them access to the raw everything.
So maybe that's a suggestion for AIR, if they can include some note in there about we do our annual survey, and we do our annual survey in partnership with our County Office of Ed and another group, and we're looking at where the kids are being served. And so that's where we use our Head Start data, but I guess I was assuming the AIR data was also based on where they're served, but I might have a mismatch in my data. And I don't know how to resolve that at this point in time, partly because we already had our hearing, and we also had some issues around the AIR population data, because what came up this year is we had zip codes who are not high need showed high need, and I need to go back and look at that. But I guess there are those intricacy pieces of information that you mentioned that I wasn't aware of, and I'm not going to remember it all. But how do we make sure?
We should make sure that there were a number of places that one and others that I found too that I thought they could do they should make sure we know what is meant, the detail of where it comes from, and then I will, maybe both of us together can urge CDE to make available the where the child is cared for, because we're talking about where do we want to place care, and both are important, the residents, but when we have some of one and some of the other, it's kind of confusing and challenging.
Well, and I know at least programs here in Los Angeles County will say that we are not necessarily serving children in the county where we're, or in the zip code in which we're located. We're serving, kids are coming from other zip codes too. But I guess
Right.
that
Where you can find a place to put them, in fact. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, and I won't be submitting school age data this year because it's a challenge to get the ACES data. Our county is so big, and so I've been trying to get ACES data, but there's
that would be a big job.
well, and I took your suggestion thinking, oh, I could look at, and then I looked it up and I looked at all the school districts and I thought I'm going to have to try to figure out what's zip codes, and so I had a conversation with our county office of ed, but I'd be interested to hear at some point how other people are capturing that data and who's giving it to them, if there's any easier way to get it. So anyway,
to get it. Yeah.
That was my other thought.
That would be helpful to us,
Yeah.
to all of us.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. This has been helpful.
Sure. Well, good. Thanks, everybody, and over and out.